Yo, what's up, y'all? I had to fix the audio on this video. I have no idea why I was playing the music on one side and the audio on the other side. I didn't change any settings in Premiere Pro, but I picked up some headphones like y'all were telling me in the comments. The audio's fixed. If you haven't watched the video already, enjoy the video. If you've seen it already, please give the video another watch. And I'm gonna put out another video in like 2 or 3 more days, so enjoy the video. You know, when I woke up this morning, I didn't think I was coming here to talk about the infinite rabbit hole that is the continuous downfall of Rick and Morty. But I'm here, so let's do it. So, Rick and Morty the anime. Who the hell asked for this? I don't think I really need to introduce y'all to Rick and Morty, and that's mainly due to the fact that Rick and Morty mania was a real thing. I swear, from like 2016 to 2018, this show was at the top of the world and you couldn't go anywhere without seeing it. Commercials, brand deals, fan art. For God's sakes, they had McDonald's Szechuan sauce. To say Rick and Morty was one of the biggest cartoons in the world at that time would be an understatement. If you told me you were a fan of Rick and Morty during that time, I'd tell you of course you were, who wasn't? And if you told me you didn't know what Rick and Morty was, I'd probably call you a liar. But like all popular shows, Rick and Morty started fading the longer and longer the show would run. And don't get me wrong, this show is still definitely popular by a lot of metrics, but you'd kind of be a fool to say that it's still in its peak. And I mean, that's kind of expected. This show's been running for over a decade now. It first started airing way back in, wait, Rick and Morty started airing in 2013? Oh god, I'm getting old. Regardless, you mix in the hiatus for the new upcoming season, and the controversy surrounding the voice actor, and it's safe to say that Rick and Morty's been scrambling for a win. But regardless of how bad they needed a win, when I found out they announced a Rick and Morty anime, I was speechless. This might be a hot take, so don't crucify me, but this was a terrible idea. And no, it's not because I'm some guy who hates anime or thinks anime is cringe, nothing like that. Some of y'all may not know this about me, but I'm actually a huge anime fan. In fact, some of the first couple videos I made on this channel before I started making cartoon content was me covering anime. Shows like Jujutsu Kaisen, Fullmetal Alchemist, and Naruto are some of my favorite shows ever created. So I'm not opposed to the idea of a Rick and Morty anime just because it's an anime. It's more due to the fact that it makes absolutely no sense. A Rick and Morty anime feels like the studio's just trying to get a quick cash grab on Western anime fans. Because number one, any real anime fan can tell you that in Japan, anime is literally just short for animation. Anything that is animated would be considered an anime. So by Japanese standards, Rick and Morty would already be considered an anime. And I don't really understand this whole concept I'm starting to see of taking Western animated media and trying to give it the anime treatment. Just recently, we had the release of the Suicide Squad Isekai anime, and while I will give it credit, the show did look cool, but it also just seems so pointless because out of all things to turn into an anime, why the Suicide Squad? We just didn't have anything else in the vault that we could have really cooked something up with. We did also get the Scott Pilgrim Takes Off anime around December of last year, but that was probably the best case scenario of a Western story being turned into an anime. Number one, because Scott Pilgrim never had an official animated series that's been long running and ongoing, but also number two, because Scott Pilgrim as a whole just has a lot of heavy anime influence, so it kind of just flowed together. But in the case of Rick and Morty the anime, just from what we were able to see from the trailers, nothing about this looked right. Nothing about this looked like a good idea. And I'm genuinely concerned and want to know who signed off on this. And you know, while I can genuinely say I have never sat down and thought to myself, hey, you know what would be really cool if they made an anime? Rick and Morty. I can say from what I saw from the trailer, I was honestly intrigued to see what they were gonna do with this. And if I'm really being honest, I just wanted to know if it was gonna be as bad as I thought it was gonna be. So when the first episode came out, I ran home, got me a snack, sat down in front of the computer, and I gave it a watch. Legally, of course. And you know, I can honestly say it is it's bad. This show is pretty bad. Starting off, and the thing I just have to mention off the top of my head, like this has been eating at me since I watched the first episode, this show is horrendously ugly. Like, don't get me wrong, I've never actually been one of the people to be a fan of the original Rick and Morty art style and character designs. It was probably the biggest thing keeping me from watching season 1 of the show because I just didn't like the way the characters looked. And I don't know about y'all, but when I'm watching my animated shows, me finding the artwork and the character designs appealing, it's like half the experience for me. But I can say for what it's worth, when you actually do get into Rick and Morty, that mindset kinda goes away. There's something about Rick and Morty's art style to where the more and more you look at it, it just kinda becomes more and more normal. And after a while, the long heads or the weird character designs, they start to become less noticeable. But Rick and Morty the anime, oh god, there were so many times I was looking at the screen in disgust. I have no idea why they did this, but instead of doing something like South Park did in the episode Let's Fighting Love, where they took the original character designs and completely remixed them to fit an anime aesthetic, Rick and Morty the anime instead tries to do the same thing, but also keep the original art style. So it's like you're looking at a weird hybrid version of the characters where they're like sloppy and sharp at the same time. And it's also not just how they drew the characters artistically, it's also how they drew them proportionally too. Like, this was one of the first things I noticed in the show. Why are they built like this? Look at their legs. How do you go from this to this? And there's just so many shots in the show where it looks like it's not finished. Like, if they come out after the fact, once they release all the episodes and say, hey, we didn't get enough time to finish this show, I'd be like, no duh. Because there are literal moments where you're looking at the screen and it looks like doodles. It looked like somebody just took their time and doodled something real quick. The way this show looks can't even compete with season 1 Rick and Morty, let alone Rick and Morty that's become an entire franchise. And the part that kind of makes me frustrated is I can't figure out, is this just an artistic choice? Is this something that they were like, hey, we want this show to look like this? Or is this just like the byproduct of poor time management? Did they not have enough funding? Like, there's so many questions I had while I was watching this first episode, and I need a lot of answers. Now, as far as the actual content in the show, nothing about this feels like Rick and Morty. And I just know there's gonna be someone out there saying, well, that's the point, it's called Rick and Morty the anime. Like we've discussed before, that anime in the title means nothing. And I guess one of the reasons why this feels nothing like Rick and Morty is, yes, Rick and Morty does touch on some deep topics, but at its very core, Rick and Morty is supposed to be like a comedy. So even when it's touching these topics that make you think, there's always a gag, there's always a follow-up to make you go, okay, time to get back into it. It keeps you on stray. And a lot of times the deepest moments in Rick and Morty don't really last that long. Some of the deepest moments are like 1-minute montages. But the anime, on the other hand, tries so hard to be deep, so hard to be profound, that it somehow comes off comedic and boring at the same time. For example, there's an episode in the original Rick and Morty show called A Life Well Lived. In the episode, Morty puts on a VR headset and he becomes a character named Roy. Now, the VR headset is so realistic that Morty genuinely forgets that he's playing a game and thinks that he's Roy. And he lives his life as Roy, growing up, going to school, getting married, having kids, fighting cancer. Morty lives and experiences a full life and gets to see the good and the bad that comes with it. But the game ends when Morty falls off a ladder, killing his character Roy. And when the game ends and Morty snaps back to reality, Rick is there telling him not bad, living to 55 is a good job. The gag being that Morty just lived an entire life and died and got to see the highs and lows of a human life. And Rick is talking to him as if he won a game of air hockey. This moment touches on serious topics while also bringing the audience back in with a gag. But in the Rick and Morty anime, this is done in the worst way possible. In episode 1, Rick gives Morty a VR headset that he designed for him, and everything that Morty experiences in the VR headset feels real to him, similar to the original show. But instead of making Morty go on some quest or having him live life where he has to make choices, they do this weird montage where it keeps jumping to 5 different realities, and in each reality, Morty is getting saved by a different person from a sandworm. Number 1, it just looks terrible, like it's actually hard to keep track of. Number 2, they spend like 20 minutes on this for a concept that was done extremely well in the original series in 1 minute. And I just don't understand why this was the route that they wanted to take. And the part that makes it really feel like a chore to watch is that there's no comic relief in the anime. That was kind of something that I noticed really quick when it came to the tone of the show and the music that they were playing. The Rick and Morty anime is supposed to be taken serious, which unironically made me laugh throughout the entire episode at how unserious it was. I kind of wish I recorded a reaction to me watching this because I could not stop laughing at certain moments in this. And it's not because it was genuinely funny, it's just funny that this show is trying so hard to be serious when nothing about Rick and Morty before has been this serious. And I think that's the main problem with the Rick and Morty anime, is trying to be something that at its core it's just not. Like I said earlier, the reason that Scott Pilgrim Takes Off works so well is because at its core, everything about Scott Pilgrim is anime inspired. The way the author wrote the comics, the fight scenes, even the way he wrote some of the dialogue, a lot of it was built on many well-known anime tropes. But when it comes to the Rick and Morty anime, it feels so out of place. And the best way I can describe it is, it doesn't feel like an official Rick and Morty project. It feels like somebody who is a fan of Rick and Morty, who is also a bigger fan of anime, wrote a fan fiction of what they would want to do with Rick and Morty. The characters don't feel like themselves. The world does not feel like itself. And honestly, if you were to just change the way the characters look, change their names, and take Rick and Morty out of the title, you would have no idea that this was a Rick and Morty project. Now, I know some of y'all are gonna say that this is only the first episode and that it could get better, which is honestly true because the bar that episode 1 set is honestly pretty low. But I don't really see how much better it can get unless this show just takes a complete 180. But if you're a fan of Rick and Morty, I honestly suggest that you don't watch this show. But also, if you're a fan of anime, I also don't suggest that you watch this show. Honestly, if you're a fan of animation in general or anything that's good, I really don't suggest that you watch this show. So yeah, Rick and Morty the anime. If you made it to the end of the video, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the noti bell to be notified when I upload my next video. And until then, it's been your boy CornXV, and I'm off this.
Up in this tank, yeah, it's old. Turn on bus mask up like coke. Pull up in Rovers, it's old. Bitch, I'm cheese Sosa, this coke. Llama, it can't want no hoes. Bottle, it can't let me pour. High as fun, just like a float. Wanna glow up, let me show.